My name is Rachel McLean. I was born and raised in a quiet town on the shores of Lake Erie in Ohio. Our town is not large, but it lives by its traditions and people who are known to everyone here. We don't have many entertainments, but the atmosphere is always warm thanks to the kind and caring people around us. My family was not distinguished by great wealth, but we always had enough warmth and love. My parents were hardworking and attentive, always creating a cozy and safe space for me and my older brother, Daniel McLean. Daniel, 3 years older than me, has been my protector and friend since childhood, the person who is always there. Our relationship was simple and sincere. We rarely quarreled and always understood each other without words. Daniel was caring and attentive, often helping me with my studies and various life trifles. In moments when I couldn't do something, whether it was school tasks or personal difficulties, he always found time to support me. I remember how he taught me to ride a bike, how we solved math problems together, and the long hours we spent playing in our small garden. For me, he was not just a brother, he was a true friend and support. However, when Daniel turned 18, he went to study at a college in a big city. For the first time, our home was left without one of its members for a long time. Those joyful days when we spent time together were in the past. Now we saw each other only on holidays and rare family celebrations. Each of his returns became an event for me. I waited for him with impatience, and perhaps our attachment became stronger because of the separation. When he came back, he always brought something not expensive, but so significant for me, gifts that showed that, despite the distance, he remembered me. The day of my departure to college filled me with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Ahead was a new life, unknown, but full of anticipation. It seemed that my heart stopped as I packed my things, closing my suitcase, realizing that now I would live in the same city as Daniel. Joy and a slight tremor filled me when the bus pulled up to the stop where I saw a familiar figure. Daniel was standing and waiting for me, as he once waited for me from walks or school events, but now everything was different. He was no longer the brother who looked after his younger sister. He looked older, more serious. His face seemed to reflect all the experience accumulated over the years away from home. When I got off the bus, something inside me flared up, as if a long-dormant emotion rose from the shadows. At that moment, I forgot about everything, about the heavy suitcases, about the long journey, about the fatigue. I left my things behind and headed straight for him, feeling with each step closer that my anxieties dissolved. Finally, I found myself in his embrace, warm and reliable. In this short moment, in the silence of our embrace, I felt an almost forgotten but so familiar confidence. Daniel gently laughed. His hand tenderly stroked my hair, as when we were children. But in his gaze, I noticed something new, not just brotherly care, but an almost imperceptible, deep tenderness that aroused even more complex feelings in me. "Rachel, you are already so grown up, but still so restless," he said with a soft smile, but in his voice, I heard emotions that were hard to describe in words. In his gaze, I saw something more than just the joy of meeting. This tenderness, this understanding. I felt both a naive girl and an adult woman standing before a new stage in life. In his presence, all my doubts and fears related to changes subsided. There were no more long months of separation, no loneliness. I was with him, next to him, and this feeling was priceless. We slowly walked along the bustling streets of the city. I looked at the surrounding bustle, felt it, but at the same time, all my thoughts were focused only on Daniel. His presence created a calm, as if next to him I could not be afraid of changes and difficulties. He told me about his life, shared moments that he had experienced over these years, and in his voice there was a new maturity. I could not help but notice how much he had changed. This Daniel was more confident, calmer, but at the same time, that sincere care that I knew from childhood still lived in him. From this contrast, my heart beat a little faster. When we arrived at his room, I involuntarily felt a wave of warmth and slight embarrassment. The whole atmosphere here was thought out to the smallest detail, modest but neat and cozy, with books on the shelves, a small lamp by the bed, and things that created a sense of home. In every item, his care was felt, his efforts to make this place not just temporary housing, but a real shelter where one could rest from the city bustle. Inside me, a thought suddenly appeared. Here, next to him, I do not feel just like a sister. This thought filled me with a strange but attractive feeling. I knew that such thoughts could be inappropriate, and yet I could not get rid of them. My soul was torn between joy and growing concern, a sense that between us now existed something more than a simple sibling bond. At first, we enjoyed life together. Every day reminded us of how we shared childhood games and secrets in our old home. We went to classes together, had lunch, told each other about our achievements and plans. Surrounded by his support, I felt calm and confident. But gradually, something began to change. These little moments when our hands accidentally touched or our gazes lingered longer began to fill me with confusion and a strange feeling of warmth that I could not explain. The closeness between us began to draw me in, and this attraction intensified the feeling of contradiction. On one hand, I knew that he was my brother, my friend, and protector, but something inside me did not allow me to stop. The mutual attraction became stronger and confused me. I felt how I gradually lost control over emotions that were once clearly separated. With each meeting, this inner tension only increased, became unbearable, filled me with uncertainty and mystery. One evening, when the day was already turning into deep night, we sat in the kitchen, having finished dinner. Between us, there was a cozy silence, but I felt how the air around became denser, as if time between us ceased to exist. We exchanged glances, and at that moment, I noticed how Daniel held his gaze a little longer than usual. His eyes seemed to try to tell me something, something that could not be expressed in words, something that remained in the silence, locked in both of us. I lowered my gaze, feeling a wave of warmth rising from the depths of my soul. At that moment, I felt how all the emotions that I tried to suppress suddenly came to life. It was something new, strange, perhaps even a little frightening. I did not know how to explain it, did not know why my heart stopped every time we were alone. All I could feel was a gentle tremor in my chest that did not disappear but only intensified in his presence. I stood up to clear the dishes, and while standing at the sink, I felt him come closer, standing right behind me. At that moment, the world around seemed to dissolve. I felt his warmth, his breath so close that I could barely restrain myself from turning around. My hand trembled, and looking into the reflection of the water, I realized what was happening now was no longer just sibling affection. This feeling grew like a wave that I could not stop. "Rachel," he said softly, his voice barely audible, almost a whisper. I froze, hearing his breath become heavy. His fingers gently touched my hand, and in this light touch, there was something deeper, barely perceptible, but irresistibly attractive. I turned around, meeting his gaze, filled with a mixture of anxiety and something that I myself found difficult to realize. His eyes shone, as if reflecting all the thoughts that he, perhaps, hid. He looked at me in a way that no one had ever looked at me before. In that moment, I understood that the boundaries between us had disappeared, that there was no wall that could hold this feeling. "Daniel," I whispered, not knowing what to say, but desperately trying to maintain calm. My words froze on my lips, not finding a way out into the air. He approached, gently touching my face, and his hand seemed to take away the remnants of doubts and fears from me. My heart beat faster, and at the moment when our faces came closer, I could barely realize that all this was really happening. Time froze, and the only thing that remained was his gentle touch, which seemed to pierce me to the depths of my soul. But suddenly I realized something inside me resisted. I realized that this moment brought with it a deep and unexplored feeling, but also a vague sense of guilt that suddenly overwhelmed me and did not let go. I stepped back, feeling how conflicting emotions, the desire to be near him and the fear of violating something immutable, fought within me. "We should be careful," I said, trying to suppress the tremor in my voice. I wanted to leave, but my feet seemed to be rooted to the spot. Daniel looked at me, and in his gaze, I saw a reflection of my own feelings. His face expressed the same confusion and despair that mine did. He was silent, as if not knowing what to say, as if he also realized how dangerous what we felt for each other was. But in the depths of his eyes, I saw pain and desire that could not be suppressed. I decided to return to my room, leaving him alone in the kitchen. That night, I could not sleep, tossing and turning, fighting with my thoughts and feelings. Thoughts of Daniel did not give me peace, as if pulling me back. Again and again, I tried to convince myself that it was a mistake, that between us there could be nothing but sibling affection. But an inner voice, deep and stubborn, again and again hinted that this was no longer just family ties, that our souls were intertwined much more strongly than I would like. The next morning, we both tried to behave as usual, but each of our glances was filled with a heavy pause, full of unsaid words and hidden emotions. It seemed that every accidental touch, it was not just a touch, but a bridge over which our thoughts passed, hidden under a mask of calm. I understood that I could not just forget what had happened, that my feelings for Daniel had become too complex and tangled to ignore. From that day, our relationship changed. Every evening became a test, every conversation, a duel, where our souls seemed to try to find a way out. But I knew that we both could not hide what we already felt for each other for long. We became vulnerable. Our communication took on some deep significance, as if in every word there was something unsaid. Every glance carried a touch that did not need confirmation. A year had passed since our feelings began to take on concrete outlines. During this time, our meetings became rare, but they became infinitely important for us. Every time we were together, the air seemed to fill with electricity, but we were silent. Each of us was afraid to say something extra, afraid that one day the words could destroy that fragile balance that we tried to maintain. But pretending further was unbearable. We with Daniel understood that these feelings required an outlet, otherwise they would simply tear us apart from within. Our families, friends, no one suspected what was happening in our souls. It seemed that the world continued its usual rhythm, and only we remained locked in this strange reality, filled with secret glances and restrained sighs. We played our roles, hid emotions behind smiles and ordinary words, but each such moment added weight to our shoulders. I felt that it could not last long, that one day we would not be able to bear it, and perhaps this day would come sooner than we could have imagined. In my second year of college, I met Jack Randall, a person whose calm presence and kindness began to gradually displace the pain that had lived in me for so long. Jack was reliable, like a rock that one could lean on. With him, I felt that perhaps I had a chance for a normal, simple life, where there would be no such painful emotions and dangerous attachments. He was kind to me, cared for me, and was always ready to listen. His confidence and determination gave me a sense of security that I lacked in this confusing world. The time spent with Jack brought me peace. Gradually, I began to understand that what connected me with Daniel had to remain in the past. Realizing this was not easy, but I knew that I had found a person with whom I could build a future filled with stability and mutual attachment. He loved me sincerely, and his love began to fill those voids that I tried to hide. Next to him, I felt whole, as if I could breathe freely and not look back at what was. One day, when Daniel returned home for the holidays, I realized that the moment had come to put an end to our hidden tension. We needed to talk, and I gathered all my determination to open my feelings to him. When we met, I felt how a familiar but even heavier silence hung between us. I could not hide the truth anymore, and sitting in front of him, I began to speak, openly sharing what was on my heart. Daniel, I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the tremor in my voice. I met someone. Jack has become for me the one who gives me hope for the future, and I decided that we need to let go of what was between us. Daniel listened to me in silence. His eyes remained sad, but there was no condemnation or reproach in them. He nodded in agreement, as if understanding that this moment had to come someday and that we both needed to accept it. I saw in his gaze the same pain that I myself felt, but also relief, as if he too could finally free himself from the weight of these feelings. We both knew that we had to return to our true roles. The conversation was not long, and although neither I nor he said anything more, our silence spoke more than any words. We understood each other without unnecessary phrases, and in this silence, I felt how something released us, giving us the opportunity to start over. Since that day, we have maintained normal communication, as if returning to the usual course. There were no more of those long, tense glances or accidental touches that caused pain. We became just brother and sister, and it was strange, but at the same time liberating. No one from our family or friends ever found out what had happened, and our secret remained only a part of our common history, deeply buried in memory. Soon after graduating from college, Jack proposed to me. Our wedding was quiet but beautiful. Daniel was also there, standing next to the others, smiling and congratulating us, sincerely sharing my happiness. In his eyes, I saw acceptance, peace, as if he too had finally let go of the past. With Jack, I found the stability that I had always sought, and now we are building a life together filled with mutual understanding and joy. Sometimes, of course, I return in my thoughts to what was between me and Daniel, but it no longer brings pain. It has become a part of my past, that lesson that I kept in my heart. We with Daniel never raised this topic again, and I knew that he too had left these feelings behind. The past is a part of our path, sometimes painful and difficult, but it helps us become who we are. I am grateful to Dan for the feelings that we shared, for the fact that he was there when I needed him so much. But now I know for sure that with Jack we have a future based on true love and sincerity, which have become the most important values for me. My life takes on a new meaning, and I am sure that I made the right choice, choosing the one with whom I can move forward, leaving the past behind.